Hello listener, how are you? Today I discuss about flocculated and deflocculated suspension. Suspensions. Suspensions may be defined as a biophasic system comprising of a solid phase uniformly dispersed in a liquid phase. Ideal properties of good suspension. Suspensions should have good durability and ease of removal of a dose. The suspension should be readily redispersible on moderate shaking. It should have good organoleptic properties. It must be composed of small uniform size particles that do not settle down rapidly. Uniform particle size distribution. It should have smooth elegant appearance. It should be physically and chemically stable. It must be resistant to microbial growth. The particles which may settle at the bottom of the container should not pack it into hard cake. The suspension should free from large particles. Organoleptic suspension should be formulated in such a way that the particle size do not exceed 10 micro. Advantage of suspension doses from. Suspensions possess certain advantages over other doses from are. Suspensions permit the formulation of poorly soluble drug as liquid doses form. Suspension is an ideal dosage form for those patients who have difficulty in swallowing tablets and capsules. Finely divided solid such as kaolin, magnesium carbonate, etc. can be administered in the form of suspensions for their absorptive and neutralizing action. Suspension is easily absorbed than other doses from except solution. Suspension is relatively easy to manufacture compared with other dosage forms. According to the aggregation of particles, suspension are two types: flocculated suspension and deflocculated suspension. Flocculated suspension. Flocculated suspension may be defined as a suspension in which the dispersed insoluble solid particles exist in the vehicle or continuous phase as a large clump or flocculus. The light fluffy agglomerated formed by the reversible aggregation of solid particles through a loose bond. Deflocculated suspension. Deflocculated suspension may be defined as a suspension in which the dispersed insoluble solid particles exist as separate or individual entities in the continuous phase, and therefore the sediment is formed slowly and eventually very closely packed, which form a hard cake which is difficult to redisperse. Comparative properties of flocculated and deflocculated suspension. Flocculated suspension. In these suspensions, the particles of the dispersed phase aggregate and form a loose network-like structure. Deflocculated suspension. In these suspensions, the particles of the dispersed phase remain as separate entities. Flocculated suspensions, the rate of sedimentation of the particles is high. On the other side, deflocculated suspension, the rate of sedimentation of the particles is slow. Flocculated suspension, the sediment form is loosely packed and does not form a hard cake. But deflocculated suspension, the sediment form is tightly packed and a hard cake is formed. Flocculated suspension, the sediment is easy to redisperse on shaking. But deflocculated suspension, sediment is difficult to redisperse on shaking. Flocculated suspension, volume of final sediment is larger. On the other hand, deflocculated suspension, volume of final sediment is higher. Flocculated suspension, sedimentation rate can be reduced markedly by reducing the particle size, and deflocculated suspension, sedimentation rate can be reduced markedly by reducing the particle size. Flocculated suspension, the suspension is not elegant since the particles of the dispersed phase tend to separate for the dispersion media. On the other hand, deflocculated suspension, the suspension is comparatively elegant because of the uniform appearance of the suspension. Thank you for watching my video. If you enjoy the video, please like, comment, share